Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. Sarah Jessica Parker, Marsha Cross, Kim Kardashian, Tyra Banks, Jimmy Fallon, Ellen Pompeo. The list goes on. But do you know what these celebrities have in common? They all needed the help of a surrogate to expand their family. Probably one of the most famous examples of surrogacy that I can think of, actually, although maybe Kim Kardashian's more famous now. But the one that comes to my mind is the storyline in Friends, the TV show, with Phoebe, who decides to be a gestational carrier for her brother and his wife, which at the time, they played it off really well. They described it, they acted it out, they had the best actors for it too. And I'll never forget that moment when Giovanni Ribisi, plays her brother on the show, finds out that she's pregnant and has this moment of, my sister's gonna have my baby. I will never forget that moment. They did that storyline quite well. Very comedically, of course, but they did it really well. And so that's what I think of when I think of surrogacy and gestational carriers. And before I go on, let me just explain that there is a little bit of a difference between technically what a surrogate is and a gestational carrier. Usually those words are used interchangeably, but technically a surrogate is someone who provides her egg to create the embryo and then carries that embryo through pregnancy. And a gestational carrier is somebody who carries an embryo through pregnancy, but that contains none of her genetic material. So technically two different things, even though we use the words interchangeably. Now, there are a lot of opinions about turning to a surrogate to help you have a baby. There are opinions all over the place about this stuff. You know, a lot of people get really confused about how the process is even possible. I mean, I've heard things like, so your husband's gonna have sex with a different woman and get her pregnant? Like, what? And for those of you who are Gilmore Girls fans, if you remember the revival that came out just a few months back or a little while ago, Luke had the same reaction when they went to go visit Paris's agency, right? And by the way, that's totally not at all how it works. That's not even part of anything about how it works. But it is a really controversial subject, and it's something that not a lot of people know about because we don't talk about it enough. And it's actually so controversial that it's still illegal in states like New York, to this day still. But here's the thing though, we talk about all aspects of family building here on Delivering Miracles. And I want you to know that this is a very legitimate way to grow your family. And I want to make sure that you have all of the right information that you need in case you do decide to go this route. Not the information that Hollywood projects, not the information that Friends or Gilmore Girls or any other TV show projects, but the actual truth about what it takes to build your family through surrogacy or gestational carriers or anything of that nature that you need. I want you to know what that really entails. So I'm really, really happy to have Eloise Drain here on this episode to share the details of not only her personal journey of helping other couples grow their families, but also how she used that personal experience to create an agency on her own to help even more couples build the family of their dreams. Eloise Drain is the founder of Family Inceptions, a boutique-style family planning agency specializing in surrogacy and egg donation. And she considers it more than a business, but rather also calling it her calling. And she strives to be a blessing to the lives of people she meets every day. In addition to her professional expertise, Eloise has personal experience as an egg donor and a surrogate, allowing her to enhance their noteworthy solutions with a unique level of empathy. And after these life-changing journeys, she was inspired to open a family planning agency in 2008 and continues to find deep joy and purpose in helping people fulfill their dreams of becoming parents. Welcome, Eloise. I'm so, so glad that you're here today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I mean, you are just an angel amongst angels on this earth for the work that you do, both personally and professionally.
Thank you. I am blushing. Thank you.
Truly. I mean, it's just when we say generous and heart centered, I mean, that doesn't even come close to the type of work that you do. And can you share with us a little bit about how you ended up here? How did you become an egg donor and a surrogate and thus ultimately starting this agency?
Sure. My story actually started in 1998. I was a kidney donor for my cousin.
Oh, wow.
And when I had the surgery, or after had the surgery, I went to visit him in California, and I saw an ad for an egg donor, and I was fascinated. And I was like, oh, I could definitely do that. I had already had been married. I had 3 children, and figured it wouldn't be an issue for me. But of course, I was fresh out of surgery, and it wasn't an option at that time. So fast forward about a year later, I contacted that same agency and asked them if I could be a donor, because I'm assuming that since I wasn't in California, it wouldn't be an option.
Okay.
And they told me no, actually, it wouldn't be an issue that I wasn't in California. The issue was that the I was African American, and there was no need for African American egg donors, because Black women
Oh,
didn't
really?
issues. Yes. Now, mind you, at that point, this is 1999. So I'm like, oh, well, okay, fine. Just keep my information on file. And then should you ever have someone that's interested, call me. Well, about 9, 10 months later, I received a phone call that they had a family in Troy, Michigan that was interested in my profile. Would I be still interested? And I said, sure, of course. And we went ahead and did the first journey, and it was actually a horrible experience. And but it resulted in a positive pregnancy, and I, for there, just couldn't be more happy for the family. But after that,
That's
I figured
amazing.
I would never do that again. So I fast forward to 2 years later. I ended up seeing an ad for a classified ad. It was a website called task.org. And I don't know, something went ahead and I told me to go ahead and apply. So I submitted my information on this classified ads website. And within, I don't know, maybe 3 hours, I was inundated with emails from African American women looking for donors. So clearly, what this agency told me 2 years before was totally incorrect. And so this next time around, I ended up being, it ended up being an opened donation. And from that point on, I always did open donations. My only first one was an anonymous donation.
Oh, I gotcha. So open meaning they know who you
They
are,
know,
you know
yeah,
who they are.
exactly.
Got it.
I've met each of the families that I've assisted, with the exception of the first one. I've even met the egg donor babies.
Oh my goodness. What was that like?
So funny enough, I'm actually still friends with a couple of them on Facebook. There's one in particular that the egg donor baby looks just like me.
Oh my
And
goodness.
but it's not, I don't feel anything more than that's my friend's daughter. I have 4 children of my own, and I definitely feel different for my own children than I do for, my friend's child. And that's how
That's
I look
really
at it.
interesting you bring that up. And that was actually one of my questions that I have for you that we'll get into in just a little bit. But that's really interesting that you share that, because I know that's a question a lot of people have about what those boundaries are
Hmm.
once you have done something like this for a family.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, and it really just depends on both sides, right? There's parents that want to go in and have a total anonymous situation. And there are definitely donors that want to also have an anonymous situation, but there are others, and there it's starting to become more and more common for people to be open to want to know who their donor is and want the donor to know who they are, so that once the child is born, down the line, they have the ability to um, get to know each other, or,
Yeah.
for at least the child to know his or her origin.
Right, right. Their biological origin for sure. I have a couple of
Absolutely.
friends who were egg donor recipients and they have children now because of egg donors. And it's really also interesting because from the parents' perspective, they choose donors that are very similar to the mother. And so there's actually a friend of mine in particular who her older son, I think, looks exactly like her, even though none of her genetic material is in him. But they have done such a great job of choosing the person that they felt was closely matched her,
Mm-hmm.
so that there would just be no way to know,
Yep.
just if you looked at the family.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And I truly believe that a parent isn't, it's not the genetic makeup that makes up the parent.
Yeah.
It's, who you are as the mom and dad. Because when your child is crying or in need of something or is hurting, they're not looking at you and saying, "Oh, do we have the same DNA? Because if we don't, I don't want you to take care of me. If I'm crying, I don't
Right.
want you to pick me up and feed me. If I fall and I'm scraped to my knee, I don't want you around because you're not genetically related to me." That's not the case whatsoever. When a
Yes.
child is born, they look at who's nurturing me, who's taking care of me, who is loving me. That's who my parent is, not, the person whose DNA I have.
Yes. And I'm so glad that you said that, because I know when people are considering this, whether it's egg donation, sperm donation, embryo donation, even, there is this sense of, well, am I a complete parent? Am I a legitimate parent? Am I enough?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of grief that comes with realizing that you need that kind of help.
Mhm.
And so I'm so glad to hear you say that from the other perspective of saying, no, you know what? Whether you've got DNA, your DNA in that child or not, you are the parent.
Absolutely.
Number 100%, you are the parent.
Absolutely. And I also feel that, for a lot of people that have to go the donor route, um, it is very okay to mourn that process.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people understand, or, when the doctors tell you you have to use donor eggs, you do have time to grieve that process.
You
And
do.
it's okay
Yes.
to grieve. It's okay to go home and sit there and cry with a box of tissues and, and feel bad and all of that. It is totally okay. It's just that
Yes.
once you do that, let it be that process and then move on.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck
Yeah.
there.
Like I tell my clients, just feel it, be
Yes.
in it, and
Yep.
then release
And
it.
release it. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So you did egg donation.
Hmm.
You met some of the babies that came from that. And then how did you become a surrogate? Were you a surrogate? Were you a gestational carrier?
I
How
was
did
a,
that
I was
happen?
gestational carrier three
Okay.
times, and I kind of transitioned to that world because when I after I did my donations, I wanted to start an agency, and this was back in 2005, 2006. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
start an agency at the time, actually specifically for minority women going through this process of looking for
That's
donors, because
cool.
it was so difficult, and it still is, to find donors that matched the criteria that they were looking for and had the
Yeah.
same physical characteristics.
Yes.
But just at that time, when I started thinking about starting an agency, I found out I was pregnant with my youngest son, and so it just was not the right timing. But then I decided to start working for an agency, a surrogacy agency that didn't have a donor program. And so I started their donor program for them. And then I learned about
Wow.
surrogacy from them. And I was fascinated. I was like, oh my God, I can definitely do this. I loved being pregnant. I zero complications. And I'm just like, yep, I was born to carry babies. It's just, some people are, and
Yeah.
I was. Um,
Yep.
and so I went to my husband and I told him that I wanted to be a surrogate. And he pretty much told me I've lost my mind, that, that I can't save everybody in the world, and that, I need to let other people help. And, I've done enough. So it took me almost a year, and I don't want to say convince him, but it definitely was about education,
Sure.
and educating him on what it really was to be a gestational surrogate. And his biggest concern, of course, was my safety.
Of course. Of course.
So, but once I really started educating him on the process, he got comfortable with it. And then once he said, fine, okay, I'll support you, I decided to find a family to help. And I wanted to help, and I had specific um, goal in mind of who I wanted to help at that time. So I wanted it to be local, so in the Atlanta area. And then I also wanted I wanted the intended parents to, actually, I was picky my first time, and I wanted the intended parents to be cancer survivors.
Oh, wow.
So my first couple that I helped, she was a breast cancer survivor. She had just right before they did her double mastectomy, she went ahead and did a round of IVF, and they were able to retrieve some
Hmm.
eggs and fertilize it. And then I came around, and we had to try 3 different times, but on the third try, it was successful, and we ended up having
Oh
twin
my
girls.
gosh. Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yes. And then after that, I definitely thought I was done. And then a friend of mine contacted me and said, I have a family that I really want you to talk to. And you really need to be their surrogate. And I'm like, no, I don't think my husband's going to let me do that again. And she's like, just go ahead and talk to her. And so I did. And we just, I mean, instantly when we started talking, we connected. And I actually found out that she was pregnant before, and then they ended up losing their son. And I happened to ask her what her son's name was. And she told me, and funny enough, that was my son's name, and it's not a very common name at all.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I just figured, well, yep, this is just God's way of telling me you're going to go ahead and do it for them too.
Right. They're basically family
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly. So I ended up having a little boy for them. And then my third family, I ended up having a little girl for them. And that wasn't supposed to happen either. But they literally, for 9 months, just kept telling me I really need to do this for them. And I'm a very spiritual person. I definitely have just really strong faith, and I feel that praying and just um, kind of praying for answers, I
Hmm.
got my answers, and that answer was to go ahead and help them. So I ended up having a little girl for them, and then I was done.
And these were all, you did these privately or you did these through
No, all
agencies?
privately.
Okay.
Yep, all privately.
So by private, meaning all of the transactions, the financial, everything was done between you and that family. There was no mediating agency there.
Correct. There was no agency.
Yeah.
Now, there was no agency though, because there was no agency at that time in my area. So
Wow.
actually I started the first agency in the state of Georgia.
That is incredible.
Yes, and but I wanted to find an agency in the area, but I wanted an agency that specifically had a couple that was local. And I reached out
Sure.
to other agencies that did exist, but they were not in the area and they did not have local families. So it just made me kind of forced me to really go out and find intended parents on my own.
Sure. Sure. That's amazing. And then you created a solution for the problem, which is
Exactly. Yep.
creating your own
Right.
agency.
Exactly.
Amazing. Wow. Wow. That's incredible. Okay, so those were the three surrogate pregnancies. And then there was one more after that?
No, so it was a total of three surrogacy pregnancies. And then actually, after I did my last one, I ended up having complications and having to have an emergency hysterectomy.
Oh, no.
Mhm.
Oh, that must have been heartbreaking.
It was. I had my boohoo moments, and everybody might think it's weird. Like, okay, you've been able to have your own children and you've been able to carry other children. So what's the big deal? But it was a very final thing that I was not ready for. I didn't get time to
Yeah.
prepare for it. I mean, I had complications. I went to the doctor on a Thursday and she told me, we have to do an emergency hysterectomy. You have your pre-op on Monday, you having your surgery on Wednesday, and that was it.
Oh,
I
boy.
mean, she
Well,
was,
I mean, I have family members who had hysterectomies even later in life. And even then, they say it's really
it
emotional
is.
because there is such a not that they were ever going to have children again. They were in their 40s
Yes.
um, and 50s, I think. But there is a finality to losing an
Yeah.
organ like that.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I mean, the funny thing is, I gave a kidney to my cousin, and
Right.
and unfortunately, 6 weeks after the surgery, he passed away. Um,
Oh, no, I'm so
and
sorry to
even
hear that.
knowing that, and it's now been 19 years, and even knowing that, I mourned this sounds so strange, but I mourned my uterus more than I mourned the kidney.
Yeah,
Um,
that actually makes a lot of sense
yeah,
to me.
yeah,
Because there's a termination there. It's not that it's going to help somebody else anymore and
exactly.
you're such a helpful person,
Yes.
especially on top of that, but it's done. There's no more for you, there's no more for anybody
Right.
else.
And the funny thing is, and this is one of the things that I told my husband when I had just got out of surgery. I'm crying about it. And he's like, why are you crying? You've helped so many people. We were never going to have any more children anyway. And my thing is like, well, what if my daughter needed it? I can't even help my
Mm.
own daughter no more. And he's just like, I think she's going to be fine.
Don't worry about it. It'll be
Yeah.
okay.
He's like, you can help her find a surrogate. She's going to be fine. So,
Oh my gosh. I mean, I wish I could just reach out and hug you. You were like the most kind-hearted, generous person I think I've ever met in my entire
oh,
life.
thank you. You know, I don't think it's about being a kind-hearted, generous person at all. Like I said, faith is my religion. My faith is really near and dear to me. And I look at it as a privilege. It is a privilege for me to be able to help these families, to be able to bring these children into the world. Every time a child is born, it is a privilege. And I really feel like it's not something that, I need to be patted on the back for or anything. It's something that
Mhm.
this is what I was supposed to do. I feel like everybody has a purpose in this world, whether they know it or not. There's a purpose. And this is my purpose. My purpose is to help each of these people that, are going through so much turmoil in having a child and being able to help ease that process for them. I mean, it just makes my life fulfilled.
It's amazing. That's amazing. And then you feel fulfilled because you know that's what you're on this earth to do.
Yes.
And then you've given so many families something they never thought would be
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. It's definitely
It's
where I feel
amazing.
like, we each um, have an opportunity to help one another in some capacity. Um, and, you have it through your podcast and helping your clients. I have it through being educated in this whole process and knowing all the nuances and the ins and outs. And because unfortunately, there's a lot of media that portrays surrogacy as such a bad thing. And it's,
Yes. One of the worst things that I hear about that is, oh, well, she just didn't want to get fat. That's why
yeah,
she's doing it.
no.
And that could not be farther from the truth because I think if anybody could get pregnant, they would do
Mm-hmm.
it. And they would want to carry their own child if they could.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the thing about it too is, so for so many people, when you're younger, when you're a little girl, you're not thinking like, oh yeah, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to get married and we're going to have somebody else, and pay all this money to have somebody else have a baby for us.
Right.
That,
Right.
nobody is thinking about that when they are little.
No, no, not at
And
all.
now you have to add this dynamic into it. And it's like, now that you have to have this dynamic, well, where do you go? What do you do? Who do you trust? I mean, I'm about to
Yeah,
trust this woman to carry my child for the next 9 months and I have no say? Like, who wants to do that? Not many
totally.
people. But if,
Not many people.
right,
Not unless you absolutely
absolutely,
have to, and that is
exactly.
the final end of the road for you.
Exactly, exactly. And when you
Yes.
do, you really want to make sure that this person was vetted, that she is fully mentally capable, physically
Yep.
capable, emotionally capable of carrying your child and delivering a healthy baby for you.
Absolutely. Let's pause here for a second because I want to make sure our listeners are following on what we're talking about really technically when it means that you have somebody carrying your baby for you, right? So, for those of you that are listening and aren't totally familiar with the process, essentially it is exactly like IVF, right? So, even if you were to carry the baby and go through IVF yourself, you would do an egg retrieval, you would do the sperm collection, or if you needed donation, say egg donation, sperm donation, or embryo donation, somehow you're going to create embryos and then you're going to freeze them. And then what happens is those embryos that you have frozen, whether they're any part donations or 100% genetically yours, instead of putting that embryo back in you as the woman who would be pregnant, you now just take that same embryo and you transfer it into another woman who is likely healthier or more capable or whatever it is to carry that pregnancy to term. So it's exactly the same as what you would do with IVF. It's just that ultimately that embryo goes into somebody else who is likely more able to carry the baby and the pregnancy to term. Now when people hear that, Eloise, and they hear these stories of surrogacy, the one thing that pops out in everybody's mind is, well, what if the woman keeps the baby and goes running with it and takes it and won't give it back?
Do you know there's
What do you say to people who are concerned about that?
do you know that there's more cases of intended parents not coming for their children than there are of surrogates trying to keep the baby?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. There are more cases of intended parents not coming for their baby than
Yes.
surrogates running with the
Yeah.
baby. Wow.
Because if you think about it, each gestational surrogate or gestational carrier is the medical term. So each gestational carrier has had to have had a child herself. She's had to have delivered a healthy pregnancy and she's had to have raised that child. And then she also has to prove that she has a support system. She has to prove that
Mhm.
she's not on any form of government assistance. So this can't just be a financial desire. It really has to be that she really wants to help somebody. Because if you break it down, with being pregnant for 9 months and then everything that you actually have to do to get to that point, she's not even making minimum wage. And she doesn't get the option to say, well, I'm tired today. I don't feel like carrying the
Right.
pregnancy. That's not an option. So,
Right, right.
so a lot of the, not a lot, every single surrogate or a gestational carrier, or even a surrogate, even a traditional surrogate, has to go through screening, has to go through psychological testing, has to go through medical screening, has to go through drug screening. So there's a lot of things that have to happen in order for her to be qualified to even be able to attempt a try.
Yeah. There's a and so by the time you get to an agency and there is a database of women there, you have now vetted them and their entire background and their partners too to make sure
Absolutely.
that they're a good
Yep,
fit.
absolutely. Because if she is married, or even if she has a partner and she's not married, her partner or her spouse has to be on board.
Yes. Yeah, has to. She needs the support. Otherwise, how is she going to do this?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I had heard from somebody was that if a gestational carrier or a surrogate wanted a baby, she could have a baby.
Right.
It's very easy for her to get pregnant. That's why she is a gestational carrier or a surrogate to begin
Right.
with. It's not the baby that she wants. It's that she wants to give you
Yes.
the baby that you can't
Yes.
have.
And believe it or not, a lot of my surrogates after the fact, it's not that they missed the pregnancy, it's they missed the relationship that they built with the intended parents during that
Yeah.
gestational journey.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense because I imagine it's a very intimate relationship that you
Absolutely.
develop.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So for our listeners who are at that point in their journey where maybe they're running out of steam with IVF on their own, or this is something that's crossed their mind once in a while, what questions should they be asking if they're starting to consider working with an agency to find a gestational carrier or a surrogate?
So, well, there's a number of questions that they would want to find out. I think the first question with any agency is how do they go about doing their screening? And what kind of screening do they do before they even match them with the intended parents? For instance, as an agency, we pre-screen all of our surrogates where they have to complete a very lengthy online application. And then once they complete the application, then we have to do a one-on-one interview that normally lasts about 2 hours. And we go into depth about what they can expect and how it all works. And then we do a background check on her as well as her partner or spouse, and we work with a private investigator. And they also have to complete a psychological evaluation with a licensed psychologist. We also have social worker that will go into their home and complete a home assessment, similar to a home study, but not as in depth. And then from there, we also require them to have an updated PAP, an updated physical, and we need all of their records from every pregnancy that they've had for delivery and for their prenatal care. And then we actually have that reviewed by a medical professional. And then once all of that is done, then that is when we'll actually present their profile to the intended parent to review. So by the time they're ready to say, yes, we want to work with this person, the only thing that's left is just the medical screening by their clinic. Now, other agencies don't necessarily do it that way. And so there's different nuances to everybody. And so it's definitely best to ask them, how do they screen? What do they use to, what's their criteria in working with various surrogates? How do they find the surrogates? And then, of course, ultimately, what is the cost? Because, the financial piece of it is significant. This is not.
It's very, very expensive.
Yeah. And this is not, not everybody is, Kim Kardashians of the world, right? So, so you wish you had the money, but the majority of people do not. And so you're having to take money out of your investments or doing, taking out loans, getting home equity. I mean, there's a whole gamut of different ways that people come up with the money to pay for this. And so, you want to know all of the expenses up front. And we are big on being very, very detailed and giving. I mean, of course, there is an approximate cost. You can't ever know every single thing, but we try to come close.
Right. I mean, as is the case with any fertility treatment,
Exactly.
really. They give you a cost sheet ahead of time, but really when you go through the cycle, sometimes you need an extra medication or you need extra visits or something, and the cost does change from what they estimate at the beginning.
Exactly.
That's amazing. So in your do you now you're based in Georgia.
Yes.
Do you work with intended parents anywhere outside of that?
Oh, yes. We work with intended parents nationwide and internationally.
That is
Mhm.
amazing. And but your gestational carriers and surrogates are based in Georgia.
No, our gestational carriers are based throughout the U.S.,
Oh,
just in
okay.
surrogate friendly states.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
We need to make it easy for everybody involved.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So we will work with any intended parents as long as there's a medical necessity. So, if they came to us today and it's like, well, I want to have a gestational carrier. I don't really have a medical reason. I just don't want to carry the pregnancy. We would probably not be the agency for them.
Sure. Sure. That makes sense. That is incredible. And so this work then started after you had your hysterectomy and could no longer carry for other families?
Oh no, this work started way before my hysterectomy. I just had my hysterectomy 2 years ago. Well, 3 years ago.
Oh, 2 years. Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed that detail. I apologize for that. That's amazing. So this has been going on for almost 10 years
Almost
now,
10
right?
years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And how many babies have you guys created for in your agency?
Um, to date, it's definitely over 100.
Oh my
I know,
gosh,
and
there's 100 new little people in this
yes,
world because of you
yes,
guys.
and I know in the whole grand scheme of things, it might not seem like it's a lot, but it's a lot. It's a lot because
It's,
it's all of these, and I have a board right in front of my computer with all the pictures of all the babies that I get,
oh my
and every
gosh.
day when I look up, I see them. They are my motivation. This is what,
Yes.
my frustrating days or the days when, you get the phone call and the transfer was unsuccessful and the parents are
Yeah.
crying and the surrogates are crying and you just feel so defeated. You look
Yeah.
up and you're like, okay, I can keep going because, this is what we're working towards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because even if those 100, that is even one of those babies is an entire world for some
Yeah.
family. I mean, it is a dream that never would have been possible to make
Yeah.
real if it were not for you.
Well, and like I tell a lot of the surrogates, or should I say every surrogate that I interview, um, in making sure that how to make sure that they are taking this very seriously, it's just like you are changing a family's legacy.
Yes.
Or in some instances, you're creating a family's legacy. And you
Yeah.
need to understand and soak that in and understand the magnitude of what you are about to undertake.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Mm-hmm.
enormous. It's
Mm-hmm.
enormous. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, this is amazing and it's mind-blowing and life-changing and just incredible. I don't have the words. I don't have the words to really put to this. It's amazing. I mean, the truth is not every family building journey is simple, easy, or straightforward, and sometimes it's even more complicated than complicated.
Yeah.
But for those of you that are listening, I want you to know and really know it's your journey and it's your decision how you want to how you want to proceed, how you want to go forward. It's your choice, it's your journey, and you get to write that even when life is throwing all kinds of hurdles your way. And if building your family is an ultimate goal of yours, surrogacy can be a beautiful way to bring together a village of incredible people to help you have the family of your dreams.
And just to add real
Oh,
quickly,
yeah.
just think about this village that's helping you create your family. This village loves your child that much to be
Yeah.
willing to do all of that.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. How loved this child is even before they're here on earth
Yep.
is so incredible. Eloise, where can people find you if they want to know more about your services or talking with you about whether they're a good candidate to receive help from you all?
Sure. So they can visit our website, which is familyinceptions.com with an S at the end. Or they can just give me a call, and it's 844-404-BABY. Just really simple enough to remember.
Oh, I love that. And Eloise, what are your final words of hope for those of our listeners who are having trouble conceiving and are considering surrogacy as an option for building their family?
Just as you were saying, I really think that there's no right or wrong way to have your family. What you have to remember is what is going to get me to my end goal, and am I going to be happy about it? And at the end of the day, once you have your child in your hand, all of what you've just went through, whether it was donor eggs or using a gestational carrier, or however many rounds of IVF you had to do, it is all going to be worth it once he or she is in your hands, or they. I mean, some people could have twins.
Right.
But once they're in your hands, all of what you just went through, all the worry and all the pain and all the anguish, once you hold that baby in your hands, you're just going to be like, you know what? It was so worth waiting for you.
I love that. You're right. It just melts in the background.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes part of your story. You never forget, but it becomes completely worth it because you've got this little baby right there with you. I love that. Thank you so much, Eloise, for coming on today, for sharing your beautiful story, and for really helping our listeners understand what surrogacy is in case any of them need to consider it. I think this is a conversation we need to have way more often in a much more realistic light than what's portrayed in the media. So thank you so, so much for being here
Well,
today.
thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share.
Thank you. Gosh, I'm speechless. I usually have so much to say and I'm speechless. Her story was incredible. The heart, the generosity, the kindness, there are no words that really describe somebody who is willing and able to give you a child. And then to do it in a way where, she's created this agency so more and more families will get an opportunity to have that child. It's mind-blowing and it's incredible. And for those of you that are listening and are at the end of your rope and you're just wondering if it's ever going to be possible to have that family of your dreams, I hope that this conversation has helped open your eyes to surrogacy as a potential option for you. Not every family building journey is simple or easy or straightforward. And for some of us, it gets really, really, really complicated. But I never want you to forget that it's your journey and it's your decision, and you get to write the story of how you want to proceed. If you're done building your family, no problem, your choice. But if you're not done and you want to keep trying or you want to consider more options, surrogacy can be a really beautiful way to bring together this tremendous village of people to help you have the family of your dreams. And Eloise was so right. How loved is that little baby before he or she's even on earth? Thank you so much for joining me here today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you can head over to iTunes and leave a review so we can get more amazing guests like Eloise to come on the show and to provide inspiration and tips and motivation and hope to help you have the family of your dreams. And if you're pregnant with complications, you're going through a high-risk pregnancy, and you want to learn how to help yourself stay pregnant as long as possible, head on over to parijatdeshpande.com and schedule a free consultation, and I'd be more than happy to talk you through what we can do to help you stay pregnant. Also, I would love to stay in touch, so follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Parijat Desh, Parijatdesh. Every family building journey is so unique, and it's yours. And it may not look the way you wanted, and it may not feel the way you wanted or hoped or dreamed of. But you do have options, and there are people out there willing and able to help you talk through them, to figure out what's going to be best for you, to help you build the family of your dreams, because you deserve it. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.